Welcome to the show, everybody. Michael with CoronavirusDiaries, and I'm fortunate enough to again connect and speak with Luke Richmond of OLOC Adventures, an Australian adventurer and author. Luke, how about give a quick description to the listeners, the viewers? Who are you and what are you up to?
Yeah, it's great to be chatting to you again. My name is Luke Richmond. I live down in a tiny little peninsula off actually tiny island state of Tasmania in Australia. So we're fairly remote down here. I am, fortunate enough to call myself an adventurer these days. So when we're not on lockdown, I get to travel around the world on mountaineering expeditions or rowing across some oceans and all sorts of crazy stuff, and get to write books and tell stories for a living. So that's sort of what I'm all about.
It's outstanding. That's how we had actually met. Is you're on you're doing training and you're out in Thailand doing some things while I was, and we connected, and here we are.
Yeah.
So before we started, you had mentioned that you're working on a project now with a charity to raise some money. You want to explain a little bit of this? This is news to me.
Yeah. I mean, with this lockdown stuff, we're all doing what we can to try and help out our communities. But I guess here in Australia, we're very fortunate with our medical system and our welfare system. Everyone's doing pretty good here at home. But I've got a buddy over in Atlanta, over your neck of the woods, who runs a non-profit called Swope Dreams. And this weekend, we're going to do a bit of a fitness and mental endurance challenge called the Marathon 1000. So together with myself and this mate of mine, Zack Mellette, we're going to run a marathon and do 1,000 push-ups together. And I'm going to take all the viewers on a nice trail run down to one of the famous capes down here, a 21K loop sort of from my house. And we're just going to take donations over that 24 hours just to pump into Swope Dreams, which can then go out into the poorer communities of Atlanta, where they're actually trying to, just get food and essentials to some of the elderly and just help people out, trying to give back in some way.
That's incredible. And for all the viewers and listeners, do you have some links that you can share for that I can plug in the abouts on this?
Yeah, for sure. It's on swopedreams.com, and I can share all the links and people can just follow along, and I'll show you some wicked Tasmanian bush.
Yeah. Just before we had started, we were talking a little bit about kind of the area that you're in. And you were talking about this natural bottleneck. I was asking because you built a chicken coop recently.
Yeah.
So
down here we've got about 25 acres of, it's just bush, like bushland, but it's right near the ocean. So I do a lot of fishing. You can get a lot of protein from the fish just off the bay. But we eat a lot of eggs, my wife and I. So we decided we'll put up a bit of a chicken coop. So we pulled down an old shed that was already on the block, and we built this monster chicken coop. Now we got 10 hens in there, and they're just, working overtime for us. So we're just trying to get, a little bit more self-efficient with all our food and supplies. We've got a nice greenhouse going now that's given us spinach and a few other things. So just slowly developing the essentials. And you asked about, threats to the chickens, whether we have foxes and that sort of stuff. Well, down here, we've got an interesting little history. In my area, this is one of the first convict settlements ever in Australia. So England used to send all of their prisoners and anyone on death row and all that stuff over here to start colonising Australia. And so there was a big prison down here for the convicts. When they came over and maybe got in trouble again, they'd lock them up in this hellhole called Port Arthur Penitentiary. And this is like 1800s. This is like a terrible time to be in this remote, cold wilderness of Australia.
Sure.
And on the peninsula, when they did escape, they'd start heading north because we're a little island state, but they'd start heading north on the peninsula, but it's got this geographical bottleneck where it feeds them back into this point that's called Eaglehawk Neck. And it's only about 100 meters wide. And during the convict days, they used to have dogs protecting this neck. It's just called the dog line. And then have a couple on the land and then a few out on floating pontoons in the water that would catch escaped convicts as they try and head north. So that natural bottleneck now just stops any foxes or Tasmanian devils or anything that comes down from up north. They can't come down here on the peninsula. So yeah, the chickens are safe.
That's such a rad piece of history. Like I'd always heard that, Australia, that's where they had sent a lot of the criminals, and that's what ended up populating down there, but had never heard about this Port Arthur. Is the fort still down there? Is there still remnants of this?
Yeah, and because we're a tiny state, we are reliant on tourism. So the Port Arthur historical site, it's called now, the old prison, is one of the to-do things in Australia. It's just famous. There's so much history, and the old structure is still there. And where the prison sits in this beautiful Port Arthur Bay, which is one of the deepest bays in Australia and the world. It's like 60 meters deep, like right there offshore.
Wow.
And it's just this beautiful, pristine coastline. So it's a great spot to come and visit.
Oh, outstanding. So as far as Tasmania is concerned, very, very heavy on the economy for tourism. How's things working out for you guys now? Because I know it's kind of, there was a bunch of stuff with cruise ships letting people out in Australia, and I know that there has been some infections in Tasmania now. It seems that there may have been a few deaths recently. What are you noticing from your end? We got a little bit of lag, but I'm sure we can work through it.
That's okay. Yeah. I mean, our whole thing is tourism, and most of our infections to date did come off cruise ships, because here in Tasmania, we do get about 100 cruise ships in over a summer season. And all those people, they boost our economy, but they also brought the infection in before we had locked off the rest of the world. But we've secured everything now. And I guess the thing about our government is the support we do get. So anyone that's lost their job automatically gets $1,500 a fortnight payment just to be okay. Anyone that's already on welfare, they get their welfare doubled. Medical and all that stuff's free anyway, but you sort of get looked after. So you're not going to be, struggling for food and the essentials. So even though we've now got no tourism and no work, we're doing fine. We're okay.
Great. Is there anything that you've noticed in terms of community? I suppose you guys are you on lockdown? Is it a true lockdown? Or are you able to go into towns if you need to, or?
Yeah, we're locked down, but only for essentials. You can travel into the grocery store. If you still are able to work, you go to your job, but you're not allowed to go to the beach or do any of that type of stuff. So I'm lucky with this challenge we've got coming up, this 21K run I've got to do. It's actually in my backyard. So I leave my house, start heading bush, and I can just link up into the wilderness. So I'm not going to run into anybody, and I'm not going to violate, the quarantine rules we have at the moment.
Sure. When you do this run, because I know before you had talked about doing a big trip all around Australia for your book, so that had to cancel. I can only imagine you had to have some sort of a support network in order to accomplish something like that. With this charity work that you're about to do, this run, and are you going to have like a chase vehicle with like how long do you expect something like that to take, and like what kind of like logistics do you need?
I think this one is going to be fairly easy. I've got a little vest that I can carry, enough water. I'll carry a couple of different assortments of food. I'll also carry a personal locator beacon. So if I do get into an emergency, I can get rescue out there. So I'll try and be self-sufficient on my chest. And the run, even though it's 21 Ks on a trail, it might take me 3 to 4 hours. And I'll be stopping to do the other portion of this challenge, which is all the push-ups, the 500 push-ups I have to do with my half along the way. So it might be a 4, 5, 6 hour little adventure. So it's not going to be like massive. It'll be okay.
Sure. I mean, it sounds like this is something that you would do for training for some of your bigger expeditions that you would do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this type of bread and butter fitness and training is just perfect when I lead into 30 or 60 day mountaineering trips or any of the longer expeditions I do get involved in.
Sure. And you said this is so we're on I believe it's 15 hours you're ahead from Central Standard Time here in the States. When could viewers or listeners be able to tune in for when you're doing this Tasmanian time?
Yes, I'm thinking it's going to be, I was just chatting to Zack about this. I'm going to do my run starting Saturday morning, and he'll be doing his on the Friday. And we're going to try and link it all up at the same time on Instagram and Facebook, and just like share our stories at the same time. So people can log on. It's going to be, I think, Friday your time, Saturday my time, and they can follow along on both of our journeys as he's running around the streets of Atlanta and I'll be banging around down here in the wilderness.
Outstanding. Yeah, that's definitely going to be something to check out and tune into for any of the viewers, listeners. So you had mentioned sustainability, right? And you're out in the bush quite a way. You're not in some major huge city, but you've mentioned this wanting to be sustainable. You grow some of your own vegetables, and you've got chickens now. how long have you been kind of developing this self-sustainability lifestyle?
Yeah, I guess I've grown up in that sort of environment. I grew up in the Northern Territory of Australia, out on big cattle stations. So you had to be fairly self-reliant. You had to know how to survive in the bush and use guns and harvest your own meat and that type of thing. Now that we've got our own block, you can start to put in all these things just to, not straight away, because this type of development takes time. Like the chickens can produce straight away, but the greenhouse will take a couple of seasons. All the fruit trees you plant might take 5 years to
Yeah.
give you fruit. But we're just planning for the future more and more now. And because we have time during this quarantine, we can take all of those initial steps to be, 2, 3, 5 years, to have all your own fruit and veg, all your own eggs. I can go and get wallaby, or I can go fishing for the protein. So really, you're not heading to town that much for goods. You can just sort of be much more self-reliant. So if something like this comes around again, it's just going to be business as usual.
Sure. No, it's a great way to look at, just being self-sustaining, is to be able to manage everything on your own. You bring in your own food, security. Did you say wallaby? Like you can go out and you can just get a wallaby and you got dinner?
Oh yeah, even in the backyard here at nighttime, there's plenty of smaller wallaby. They're called a paddy melon. They're only about, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 kilos in weight. It's like 22
Wow.
pounds or whatever. But just down the road, another mate of mine's got a bigger block, a little 50-acre block of bush.
Nice.
And down here to get some big wallaby, but there's just hundreds. So if you do need one, I typically, we'll harvest one and then turn it into minced sausages or patties or whatever else, just to have a solid protein source, organic fed, straight from the wild. You harvest it correctly, you do it all properly, and it's really good food.
Sure. Are you guys, you drill your own well out there? I can't imagine there's city water, right?
No, it's all rainwater. I mean, on the peninsula especially, we get plenty of rain every year, and I've got 5 10,000-litre water tanks hooked up to the house, and that does us for all of our water needs all year, no problem.
Outstanding. Wow. That's it'd be really cool to get a look around your place. Are you going to do that before you go on your run and your push-ups? Are you going to?
Yeah. I'll take you on a full tour of Tassie. I'll start with the block, and then I might go down to the historical site and give you a bit of a look at that. And then I'll head down to the Cape route that heads through the bush and into the coastal trail. I'll show you it all.
It's huge, man. So in 2 weeks, about 2 weeks since we talked last, it sounds like, things are just kind of rolling along as they kind of always have. It's just there's this new topic that's in the media and the news for you. It hasn't really changed stuff. Is that kind of a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, different parts of Australia, different reactions. Down here, living remote and making a living the way I do through book sales online and speaking gigs, it hasn't affected me much. I just can't go off on big expeditions. But I know that my friends up in Sydney, like our biggest hub of business, who have gyms and restaurants and all that stuff that have been shut down, like these types of families are doing it very, very tough.
Yeah.
The government is pumping in a lot of money to help them out, but still it's gonna wreak havoc with the economy as an Australia overall, for sure.
Out of curiosity, so it sounds like a lot of governments are doing something similar with stimulus. They're pumping in money into the economy through, like we're getting a $1,200 check or something, one-time check, and there's talk of, supplying more checks regularly to people. Is there any concern, or what's the sentiment in Tasmania with the government injecting a bunch of money like that? Is there any concern over inflation, or do they believe it's going to work, or is there kind of concern that it's just a kind of smoke and mirrors for the time being?
Yeah, I mean, the government's definitely in damage control, because something like this hasn't come around in our lifetimes, a big hit like this. So they're doing what they can. I know they are very, very tentative and very, I guess, hesitant to open restrictions again. They don't want to just let it go because they're not sure how the virus will respond. In terms of the spending, they're just weighing it up that lives are far more important than the money at the moment. And we will just see how long that type of thinking lasts until the economy really does start to struggle, because as you know, with any stimulus, with any debt to a country, maybe more so to a small country like us, if we get a big debt, that has to be paid somehow. And that could be in more like austerity measures with a bigger GST taxes or income taxes and all that type of stuff on the back end. So I know some people are worried about what's going to come after all this spending in regards to my business and the way I live my life, and how much do we spend until those, fallout on the other side, get too great, and we have to start making that real difficult decision of how much lives really matter to the grand economy of the whole country and the way we live.
Sure, and the global economy. It seems there's potential for some countries to have to help prop each other up. It'll be interesting, definitely, to see what happens in the coming months. Before I let you go, I know we're getting to that time. Curious, when you're contemplating this whole COVID pandemic, where do you see everything in, say, 6 months, a year and a half? Do you foresee it way out in a year and a half, or do you feel like by then? I mean, I guess I'm just curious. Where do you see everything?
Yeah, I mean, I can see Australia itself opening up our state borders, so allowing domestic travel again within probably the next 3 to 4 months. I think that's going to happen for sure, just to get our own domestic economy booming again and get Australians traveling within the state and spending money in other states. I think that's going to be important. The international side of it will be a whole different ballgame. I think we won't open up inbound international travel until there's an actual vaccine. That's just how I'm interpreting our Prime Minister at the moment.
Sure.
And our own travel internationally, I think, will be dictated by each individual country's response to that same question.
Sure.
I'd like to see the domestic side open up in a few months, because that just opens up everything that I can do in my adventure world and how the country can respond. And the international side of things, immigration and all that, I think that's going to be well after vaccination time.
Sure. Fair assessment. Luke, thank you as always. It's a pleasure. I really appreciate being able to connect with you. And for all the viewers and listeners, again, all the information for his upcoming adventure for the charity will be in the About section below, as well as all the information that you can find, any of his books or other stuff that he's been up to. So again, thank you, Luke. Appreciate it, and look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you so much.